Nobody wanted me. Not even the kind-hearted volunteers who whispered sweet promises through the chain-link fence. And I heard myself saying it out loud one morning, my voice barely louder than the hum of the buzzing fluorescent lights above my kennel. Maybe they'll never take me home. My name is Benny, and my smile is crooked. Not just a little crooked, but the kind of crooked that makes people tilt their heads and whisper to each other like I can't hear them. It happened long ago, before I even understood what a home was supposed to feel like, before I knew that a family could mean safety and love. The shelter was all I knew now, a place that smelled of disinfectant and fear, where the sound of barking was a constant reminder that we were all waiting for something we couldn't see coming. Every morning started the same. The metal door would screech open, and footsteps would echo down the hallway. The scent of kibble and bleach would hit my nose, and my tail would wag even though my heart didn't believe it anymore. I'd press my face against the bars, trying to look friendly, trying to look like a dog worth taking home. But when they saw my mouth curve sideways, like a broken smile caught halfway through a laugh, they'd move on. I'd watch the puppies get scooped up, the golden retrievers and spotted Dalmatians, tails wagging so hard they could fly away. People loved those perfect smiles, the ones with straight teeth and bright eyes. My smile? It scared them. They'd lean down, pat their children on the head, and whisper, "Let's look at the next one." Days blurred into weeks, and weeks dragged into months. I learned the rhythm of disappointment, the way hope could rise when footsteps approached, only to crumble when they moved away again. I slept on a thin blanket that smelled like 100 other forgotten dogs before me. Sometimes, at night, when the shelter quieted down and only the hum of the lights and the occasional whimper from another kennel filled the air, I'd dream of hands touching me softly, a voice calling my name, a door opening to grass and sunlight. But every morning, the dream would vanish, leaving me staring at the same four walls, my crooked smile as lonely as ever. Then, one rainy afternoon, when the world outside was a blur of gray, I heard a new set of footsteps, smaller ones, uneven and hesitant, as if the person they belonged to wasn't sure they wanted to be here. My ears perked up despite myself, my tail giving a cautious wag. The scent was different this time, lighter, like crayons and peanut butter sandwiches. A child's giggle floated down the hallway, followed by the steady, reassuring steps of an adult. My heart thudded in my chest, hope clawing its way up even as I told myself not to believe. People didn't come for dogs like me. Not ever. The child stopped in front of my kennel, and for the first time in so long, someone didn't immediately look away. Big blue eyes stared at me, wide and curious, taking in every part of me, even the crooked way my mouth curled. I pressed my nose against the bars, not daring to move too fast, afraid to scare away this little bit of magic that had found its way to me. The child crouched down, small fingers gripping the edge of the kennel door. "Hi," they whispered, their voice soft, like they were sharing a secret. My heart skipped. No one had said hello to me in months. Not like that. Not like they meant it. And for a moment, I let myself imagine that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something different. The volunteers approached, their smiles kind but cautious. They'd seen this before. Children drawn to dogs their parents wouldn't take home. But something about this felt different, like the rain outside was washing away all the old sadness, leaving just this moment, me and this child, staring at each other as if we both knew what it felt like to be unwanted, waiting for someone to finally choose us. The child's eyes stayed on me, wide and filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Pure wonder. My tail twitched uncertainly, my heart thudding as I pressed my nose closer to the bars. The adult with them stood just behind, a tall man holding an umbrella still dripping rainwater onto the floor. He looked tired, like maybe he'd been carrying something heavy inside for a long time. But his gaze wasn't on me yet. It was on the child, watching carefully, like he wasn't sure what would happen next. The little one leaned closer until their face was only inches away from mine. I could see the freckles on their nose, smell the sweetness of peanut butter that clung to their fingers. My breath fogged the metal bars as I waited, trembling, not daring to bark or move too fast. Then they whispered it again, a little louder this time. "Hi." The sound washed over me like sunlight after a storm, and my ears tilted forward, soaking up every bit of kindness in that single word. No one had ever said it like that. Not to me. They didn't flinch at my lopsided grin. They didn't glance away like everyone else. They just saw me. For a moment, it felt like the whole world slowed down, like the hum of the shelter lights faded, like the smell of bleach and loneliness drifted away. It was just the two of us, a crooked-smiled dog and a small child who didn't care about broken teeth or old scars. I wanted to reach out, to show them I could be gentle, that I could be good. I nudged the bars softly with my nose, letting out the smallest whimper, not out of sadness this time, but out of a quiet, desperate hope. The child's eyes softened even more. They reached a hand through the bars, tiny fingers brushing my fur. The touch was feather-light, hesitant but kind, and it sent a warmth through me that I'd almost forgotten existed. The man stepped closer now, kneeling beside the child. His face was lined, his eyes the color of a cloudy sky. He glanced at me, and I saw the familiar reaction, the pause, the slight frown, the way his eyes lingered on my crooked mouth. But unlike all the others, he didn't immediately stand and walk away. He just stayed there, one hand resting on the child's shoulder, silent and thoughtful. A volunteer approached with a cautious smile, speaking softly so as not to break the moment. "That's Benny," they said. "He's been here a long time. He's a special boy." Their voice carried something I couldn't quite place, a mix of sadness and fragile hope, like they wanted to believe I still had a chance. The child turned to the man. "Dad, can we see him? Please?" Their voice was a gentle plea, the kind only a child could make, full of honesty and longing. The man hesitated, glancing at me again. His eyes seemed to weigh 1,000 invisible things, but he nodded slowly. "We can meet him," he said softly, his voice low and steady. The kennel door creaked as it swung open. I stayed still, heart racing, wanting so badly to do everything right, to show them I wasn't a mistake, that I could love and be loved. The child knelt on the floor as the volunteer brought me out on a leash. My paws trembled on the smooth concrete, my tail unsure whether to wag or tuck. But when the child reached out again, I took a cautious step forward. Their small hand brushed my face, unafraid of my crooked smile, unafraid of me. It had been so long since someone looked at me like that, like I wasn't broken, like I was just a dog waiting to be loved. I leaned into their touch without meaning to, a soft sigh escaping my chest. The world around me faded. The barking, the rain tapping the shelter windows, the endless waiting. In that moment, all that existed was this little human who saw me, really saw me, and didn't turn away. For the first time in forever, something inside me stirred, something I thought I'd lost forever. A tiny, fragile hope that maybe this wasn't the end of my story after all. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something I had only ever dreamed of. The volunteer led us to a small, fenced play area behind the shelter where the rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the grass damp and the air heavy with the scent of wet earth. My paws hesitated on the threshold, unsure what to expect, but the little human was already there, waiting, crouched low with their arms open just enough to invite me closer. My heart raced in a way I couldn't control, my crooked mouth twitching nervously as I tried to take in every detail. This was new, this was different, and I didn't want to ruin it. The man stood nearby, his arms folded, his eyes studying me with a kind of quiet caution. I had seen that look before, the look adults had when they were already imagining all the ways a dog like me could go wrong. But the child didn't see any of that. They were smiling, eyes bright like the rain had nothing on their happiness. They patted the ground, encouraging me closer. My paws sank into the damp grass as I stepped forward, slow and careful, my tail wagging low but hopeful. When I reached them, their small hand brushed against my fur again. That gentle touch was like something out of my dreams, the kind that used to fade with the morning light. They giggled softly, and the sound made my tail wag harder until it felt like my whole body was caught in its rhythm. The man finally knelt, one knee sinking into the wet grass, and he reached out too, tentative but not unkind. His fingers scratched lightly behind my ear, and I leaned in, craving that connection I hadn't felt in so long. The volunteer spoke softly from where they stood. "Benny's been here almost 2 years," they said, their voice tinged with sadness. "He's sweet, but folks always pass him by." I didn't need to understand every word to know what they meant. I had watched it happen enough times. But for the first time, the weight of that truth didn't feel as heavy, not with these two kneeling in the grass beside me. The child picked up a small, worn-out tennis ball from the ground and held it out to me. My ears perked, my head tilting, as I waited to see what they wanted. They tossed it just a few feet away, their laugh bubbling out as I scampered after it, my paws kicking up droplets of water. I grabbed the ball clumsily, my crooked smile making my grip awkward, but when I turned back, they were clapping, cheering for me like I'd just done something amazing. No one had ever looked at me like that before. I trotted back, chest puffed with a strange pride, and dropped the ball at their feet. The man's expression softened as he watched us play, his arms relaxing at his sides. He shared a quiet look with the volunteer, something unspoken passing between them, and I caught a hint of warmth in his eyes when they settled on me again. For the first time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, an adult wasn't only seeing what was wrong with me. Minutes slipped by like they didn't matter, filled with the child's laughter and my own joy at simply being noticed. I rolled in the wet grass, I nuzzled their hands, and I felt pieces of my old fear start to fall away. Every time I glanced up, their eyes met mine without hesitation, like my crooked smile wasn't broken at all. It was just mine. The rain picked up a little, droplets landing on my fur, making me shake and sending water everywhere. The child laughed even harder, hugging me suddenly around my neck. I froze for a moment, shocked at the closeness, but then I melted into it, pressing my nose to their shoulder. That hug was everything I'd been waiting for, everything I'd dreamed of on all those lonely nights in my kennel. I heard the man sigh softly, not in frustration, but something else, something gentler. He crouched closer, his hand settling on the child's back as he spoke quietly, his words slow and careful. I didn't know exactly what he was saying, but his tone carried a weight that felt like he was starting to see what his child saw. He looked at me then, really looked, and there wasn't just caution in his gaze anymore. There was something that looked a lot like possibility. We stayed out there for what felt like forever. The rain, the mud, the gray sky above. It didn't matter. What mattered was that for once someone had come close and they hadn't pulled away. For the first time in my life, I let myself believe that maybe I wasn't waiting for nothing after all. The sun tried to peek through the thick clouds as the rain eased into a mist, leaving the world smelling fresh and damp. We stayed in the little play yard longer than I ever thought anyone would stay with me. My paws were muddy, my fur damp, but for the first time in forever, I didn't care about the mess. The child was still there, sitting cross-legged in the wet grass, eyes bright as if this patch of shelter ground was the best place in the whole wide world because we were sharing it. I stayed close, moving only when they moved, every inch of me afraid they might suddenly stand and walk away like all the others. But they didn't. They giggled when I shook myself dry, sending drops flying. They picked up the tennis ball again and again, tossing it short distances that I scrambled to fetch, my crooked smile making my tongue loll out the side of my mouth. Every time I brought it back, they clapped like I'd done something incredible. The warmth in their laughter soaked deeper than any rain ever could. The man watched quietly, leaning against the fence with his hands in his pockets. He looked thoughtful, not rushed like the others who'd come before. I caught him staring at me a few times, his gaze heavy with something I couldn't quite read. I wondered if he saw what his child saw, or if he was just waiting for a reason to say no. The volunteer checked a watch, then spoke softly. "You can spend as much time as you like with him," they said, their voice gentle. "He really needs this." Their eyes flicked toward me, and I felt that familiar ache, the kind that knew I was still just a dog waiting for a miracle. But today felt different. After a long while, the child reached out and hugged me again. My whole body stilled, then relaxed into their arms. No one had hugged me in such a long time I'd forgotten what it felt like. My tail thumped against the ground, slow and steady, my eyes closing as I breathed in their scent of rain, crayons, and hope. I wanted this moment to last forever, wanted to freeze time before someone said it was time to leave. The man knelt beside us, his hand resting on the child's shoulder. He looked at me, really looked, and the sadness in his eyes seemed to shift, softening just a little. His voice was quiet when he spoke. "He's different," he said. The child nodded fiercely, hugging me tighter, as if my difference was the best thing they'd ever seen. Something in the man's face changed then, like a locked door cracking open. He reached out a tentative hand, brushing the fur along my neck, his touch uncertain but not unkind. I leaned into it carefully, giving him the same chance I'd given the child, showing him I could be gentle too. The minutes slipped by until the volunteer gently reminded them that visiting hours would be ending soon. My heart lurched at the words. I didn't want them to go. My paws shifted nervously, my crooked smile trembling as I whined softly. not knowing how to make them stay. The child looked up at their dad with wide, pleading eyes. "Can we come back tomorrow?" they asked, their voice filled with a mix of hope and desperation that I understood all too well. The man hesitated, his eyes flicking between me and his child. He let out a long breath and nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said softly. "We can come back." I didn't understand every word, but I felt the promise in his tone. A promise that this wasn't over, that this wasn't just another day of hope rising only to shatter. As they stood to leave, the child crouched one last time, cupping my face gently in their hands. "Bye, Benny," they whispered. "We'll see you soon." My tail wagged despite the ache in my chest as I watched them walk away, the volunteer leading me back to my kennel. The familiar smell of disinfectant and fear greeted me, but for once it didn't feel as heavy. I curled up on my blanket, my crooked smile softening into something almost peaceful. Because for the first time in as long as I could remember, someone had promised to come back, and deep down I believed they would. The morning came with a gray sky and the smell of damp earth still lingering from yesterday's rain. The shelter bustled with the usual sounds of barking and footsteps, but my heart beat differently today. The memory of small hands holding my face, the promise whispered in my ear, gave me something I hadn't felt in so long, a reason to hope. I sat at the front of my kennel, eyes fixed on the hallway, every muscle in my body waiting for those footsteps to come back. The hours felt endless. I watched family after family walk by, pausing at the puppies, pointing and smiling at the perfect ones. My tail wagged at each new sound, my crooked grin desperate to be noticed, but no one looked twice. Still, I stayed close to the bars, because I believed that today might not be like all the other days. It was late afternoon when I heard it, a pair of lighter footsteps pattering excitedly, a voice I remembered calling my name. My whole body jolted to life, tail thumping against the kennel wall as I pressed my nose forward. There they were, the little human and the man, both stepping into view. My heart soared, my crooked smile wider than ever as I let out a soft whine of pure joy. The child ran to the kennel door, their small hands reaching through to touch my fur. "Hi, Benny," they said, with that same warmth that had kept me dreaming all night. I licked their fingers through the bars, my tail wagging so hard it shook my whole body. The man stood behind them, watching quietly, a thoughtful expression on his face. He didn't look rushed or uncertain today. Instead, he looked like someone who had spent the night thinking about me. The volunteer came over with a kind smile, unlocking the gate to lead us back to the play yard. As soon as the door opened, I bounded out, paws skidding on the concrete before I reached the grass. The child followed with laughter bubbling out of them, and I felt a joy so deep it made my chest ache. We played again, just like yesterday. The tennis ball flew, my paws chased it, and every time I brought it back, the child hugged me like I was the most special dog in the world. The man crouched down more often this time, watching closely as I interacted with his child. He scratched my ears, rubbed my back, and for the first time I saw a smile flicker on his face that looked real, not just polite. After a while, the man spoke softly to the volunteer, his voice low enough that I couldn't understand all of it. But I caught words like gentle, good with kids, and deserves a chance. My ears perked, my heart beating fast with something that felt like it might be the start of everything I had ever wanted. The child sat on the grass beside me, leaning their small body against mine as they whispered to me about their room at home, their favorite toys, and a backyard with soft green grass where we could play forever. I didn't know what forever felt like, but sitting there with them, I thought maybe I was getting close to finding out. When visiting time started to wind down, I felt that same ache I had yesterday, the fear of watching them walk away. But today, something was different. The man stayed behind after the volunteer reminded us of the time, talking in a more serious tone, asking questions about me, about what I needed, about my crooked smile and whether it made life harder for me. The volunteer answered kindly, telling him that my smile didn't change the way I loved, that I was just as worthy of a home as any other dog. The man looked at me then, his eyes meeting mine, and there was something there I had only ever seen in the child before, a softness, a hint of connection. He knelt beside me, his hand steady on my fur, and for the first time he said my name out loud. Benny. My ears perked, my tail wagged, and in that one word, I felt the beginning of something I had been waiting my whole life to hear, the feeling of finally belonging somewhere, even if we weren't there yet. When they left, the promise came again from the child, bright and certain. We'll come back tomorrow, Benny. We'll see you again. And this time, I could see in the man's eyes that he believed it too. The next morning felt different from all the others, like the air itself had been holding its breath waiting for what would happen today. The shelter was filled with the usual sounds, barking, clinking food bowls, the shuffle of footsteps, but my heart raced faster than it ever had before. I paced my kennel, tail wagging every time I thought I heard the familiar sound of their footsteps. My crooked smile stretched wide, my chest full of hope so big it felt like it might spill out of me. Hours passed, and I kept watch, eyes locked on the hallway. Other families came and went, glancing at me but never stopping. Yet it didn't hurt as much as it used to, because I believed they were coming back. I clung to the memory of soft hands on my fur, of the little voice promising me forever. Then I heard it, the quick, light steps of the child, followed by the slower, steady rhythm of the man's boots. My heart leapt as their voices floated closer. Benny, the child called before even reaching my kennel, their excitement filling the space like sunshine. I bounded forward, tail wagging so hard it rattled the metal bars. When they appeared, smiling just for me, it was like the whole world narrowed down to that moment. The volunteer opened my kennel, and I raced out, skidding across the floor before making it to the play yard. The child was already there, arms open wide, and I ran straight to them, pressing my face into their chest, feeling their tiny arms wrap around my neck. My tail couldn't stop wagging as their giggles filled my ears. For the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged to someone, even if it wasn't official yet. The man stood close, watching us, his expression softer than ever. Today, he didn't just observe, he joined in. He tossed the ball farther than the child could, clapped when I brought it back, and even knelt to rub my belly when I rolled over in the grass. I looked up at him with my crooked grin, and he actually laughed, the sound low and warm, like it had been a long time since he'd found something to laugh about. After a while, the three of us just sat there in the sunshine, the world around us quiet except for the distant barking of other dogs. The child leaned against me, their head resting on my shoulder, while the man sat close, his hand brushing through my fur absently. There was a calmness in that moment that felt new, like maybe all three of us had been missing something and had somehow found it here together. Eventually, the man stood and walked over to the volunteer. They spoke for a long time, their voices low but serious. I caught words like home visit, paperwork, and trial adoption, though I didn't understand them all. But every time the man glanced over at me, there was something in his eyes that made me feel like this was more than just another visit. The child came over and hugged me tightly, whispering about all the things we could do if I came home with them. They painted pictures of playing in a yard, cuddling on a soft bed, having my very own bowl and toys. Every word made my heart beat faster, like I was standing at the edge of the life I'd been dreaming about since the day I lost my first home. When it was time to leave, I whimpered softly, not wanting them to go, but this time there was something different in the man's smile. He crouched down, met my eyes, and said my name again in that same warm tone. "See you soon, Benny," he promised. "Real soon." I watched them walk away, my heart full, my crooked smile soft. For the first time since I came to the shelter, it felt like the waiting might actually end soon. And as I curled up on my blanket that night, I closed my eyes and let myself believe that the next time those footsteps came down the hallway, everything might finally change. The day began with sunlight streaming through the high windows of the shelter, casting long lines across the floor of my kennel. The world felt brighter, different from all the other mornings I had known here. My crooked smile twitched with anticipation, my heart drumming wildly in my chest. I kept pacing, sitting, standing, turning in circles, ears straining for the sound. I wanted more than anything. The small, quick footsteps followed by the heavier ones that always came with them. I had barely finished my breakfast when I heard them. My tail started wagging on its own, faster and faster, my whole body vibrating with excitement. The child's laughter reached my ears first, light and happy, followed by the deep voice of the man speaking softly to a volunteer. My paws scratched against the floor as I rushed to the bars, pressing my nose against the metal just as they appeared around the corner. My crooked grin spread wide, and I let out a happy bark that echoed down the hallway. "Benny!" the child called, racing ahead of the man to reach me first. Tiny hands poked through the bars to scratch my head, and I licked them eagerly, my tail thudding against the wall. The man walked up slower, but smiled as he knelt to greet me, his large hand running gently over my ears, like he'd known me forever. The warmth of his touch made me want to stay like this forever, just soaking in the love I'd been missing all my life. The volunteer opened my kennel, and I bounded out, barely able to contain myself. We headed outside, and as soon as the leash was off, I ran straight into the yard, spinning in circles, my joy spilling out in every direction. The child laughed and chased me, throwing a ball that I raced after, kicking up little clouds of dust as I ran. Each time I brought it back, the child threw their arms around me, holding me tight like I was the most precious thing in the world. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally starting to believe that I could be. Today felt different. The man sat on the grass with us instead of standing off to the side. He played tug-of-war with an old rope toy, laughed when I pulled hard, and praised me every time I sat when he asked. His face, usually serious, had softened so much that it almost looked like a different person had walked in today. He kept glancing at the child, then at me, and something unspoken passed between them, something that felt like a promise. At one point, the volunteer came over with a clipboard and spoke quietly to the man. I didn't understand the words, but I could hear the change in his tone when he responded. Words like papers, trial run, and home visit floated on the breeze, making my ears perk up even more. Every time they said my name, it was followed by the kind of tone that made my heart swell, the kind that hinted at a life outside these walls. The child lay in the grass beside me, talking about what my new bed would look like, what color my collar might be, and how we'd watch cartoons together on the couch. Their voice was soft but full of excitement, painting pictures in my head that made my crooked smile feel bigger than ever. I nudged my nose against their cheek, and they giggled, hugging me tighter. As the sun shifted higher, casting warm light over all of us, I started to sense something important was happening. The man signed papers, nodding seriously as the volunteer explained things. He looked over at me, then reached down to scratch my head, saying my name softly. It wasn't a question this time. It sounded certain, like he already saw me as his dog. When visiting time ended, it didn't feel like before. The man didn't just promise to come back. This time he crouched down, looked me in the eyes, and said in a firm but kind voice, "We'll see you very soon, Benny. We're getting everything ready." My tail wagged harder than ever, and I pressed my head against his chest, trying to tell him that I was ready too, more ready than I had ever been in my life. As they walked away, the child turned back 3 times to wave at me, their smile as bright as the afternoon sun. I watched them leave, my heart full, my crooked grin stretched wide. For the first time since I had arrived at the shelter, I didn't just have hope. I had the feeling that my waiting was truly coming to an end, that soon I would finally know what it meant to be home. The next day started with a kind of energy that I had never felt before in the shelter. The volunteers moved with purpose, cleaning and preparing like they knew something exciting was about to happen. I paced my kennel, my crooked smile pulling wider every time I thought I heard the sound of their footsteps. My heart beat fast, not with nervousness like it used to, but with an overwhelming hope that today would be another step closer to the life I had been dreaming of. It wasn't long before I heard the child's giggles echoing down the hallway, followed by the steady voice of the man. My whole body shook with excitement, my tail slapping the bars as they appeared around the corner. "Benny," the child called out, their voice high and happy as they ran straight to me. I pressed my nose through the metal and showered their small hands with kisses. The man smiled as he approached, reaching down to scratch behind my ears in the way that made me feel like I truly belonged to someone at last. Today was different. The volunteers led us to a special room I had never been in before. It was quieter than the rest of the shelter, with a big rug on the floor and toys scattered around. The scent of treats hung in the air, making my tail wag even harder. The man sat down on the floor right away, patting the space beside him, and I ran over, leaning against his legs while the child plopped down on my other side. We stayed like that for a long time, just being together, as if we were already a family. They brought out a collar for me, new and blue, the same color as the child's sneakers. The man slipped it gently around my neck, fastening it carefully before running his fingers over it like it was the most important thing he'd ever held. "Looks perfect on you, Benny," he said softly. My heart swelled at the sound of my name on his lips, certain and warm, as if it already belonged to him forever. We played for what felt like hours. The child tossed toys, and I raced after them, bounding back with each one just to hear their laughter again. The man rubbed my belly until I fell over in happy exhaustion, paws kicking in the air as I melted under his touch. Every moment felt brighter, fuller, like the empty space inside me was being filled with love I had been waiting for my whole life. After a while, the volunteer returned, carrying a folder full of papers and a pen. The man's voice was serious but calm as he asked questions and signed his name, glancing at me every so often with a small, thoughtful smile. I didn't understand what it all meant, but I could feel it, the weight of something important shifting in my favor. The child whispered excitedly to me about how this meant soon I would leave the shelter and never have to come back again. Their small hands wrapped around my paw, as if sealing a promise neither of us could ever break. Before they left, we went outside one more time. The sun was setting, casting golden light over the yard, turning everything soft and warm. The three of us sat in the grass together, quiet and peaceful, watching the world around us. I leaned against the child, while the man rested a hand on my back, his touch steady and reassuring. The silence felt safe, like this was already home even though we weren't there yet. When it was finally time for them to go, my heart ached, but this time it wasn't fear or sadness. It was longing, knowing that every goodbye was just bringing me closer to the day they would come and take me with them forever. The man crouched down and looked me in the eye, his voice deep and certain as he said, "One more visit, Benny, and then you're coming home." I watched them leave, the child waving until they disappeared through the door. I curled up on my blanket that night, my new collar resting against my neck, and for the first time since I had been brought to the shelter, I knew without a doubt that my waiting was almost over, that soon I would finally know what it felt like to truly belong. The next morning felt different in a way that I couldn't quite explain. The sun shone brighter through the high windows, and even the usual sounds of the shelter, the clinking bowls, the barking of other dogs, felt lighter somehow. My crooked smile stretched wide as I paced my kennel, waiting, my ears twitching toward every sound in the hallway. My heart knew they were coming. I could almost smell the faint mix of crayons and peanut butter that always followed the child, the comforting scent of the man's jacket that smelled faintly like soap, and the outdoors. I stayed alert, tail wagging furiously with every footstep I heard, until at last, the ones I was waiting for arrived. The door opened, and the child's laughter filled the air, their sneakers squeaking against the floor as they ran toward me. "Benny!" they called, dropping to their knees and pressing their small fingers through the bars. I rushed forward, my nose nudging their hands, licking their fingers like I had been waiting forever for this moment, which in many ways I had. The man walked slower behind them, his calm smile just for me. And when he reached the kennel, his large hand found the top of my head and rubbed in that slow, steady way that made everything feel right in the world. Today was even more special. A volunteer clipped a leash onto my collar and led us all toward the big exit doors, the ones I had only ever seen other dogs go through before they never came back. My paws skittered nervously on the tile, my excitement mixing with a little fear. But as the child's hand rested on my back and the man's voice spoke my name in that low, soothing tone, the fear melted away. We stepped out into the sunlight together, the fresh air wrapping around me, carrying with it scents of grass, cars, and freedom. We walked around the shelter yard for a while, the man talking softly to the volunteer, signing more papers, asking questions. Every now and then he looked down at me, his expression serious but warm, as if he was making promises just by meeting my eyes. The child stayed close to me, their small fingers tangled in my fur, telling me about all the things we were going to do soon. Trips to the park, a soft bed by their own, toys just for me, and biscuits waiting in the kitchen. Each word made my heart pound faster, my crooked grin stretching as far as it could go. We sat in the grass for a long time, just being together, the sun warming our backs. The man leaned back on his hands, watching us play, his eyes softer than I had ever seen them. He reached out now and then to scratch behind my ears, as if reassuring both of us that this connection was real, that soon it would be forever. The child's laughter rang out across the yard, bright and happy, a sound I wanted to hear every day for the rest of my life. When it was time to go back inside, I felt that ache in my chest again, the longing I had every time they left. But this time, it was different. The man crouched down, holding my face gently between his hands, looking me straight in the eyes. "Just a little longer, Benny," he said firmly, his voice carrying a weight that made me believe him. "We're coming back for you, and next time, you're coming home." The child hugged me tightly, their cheek pressed against my crooked smile, whispering a promise of tomorrow, a promise that felt as strong as anything I had ever known. I watched them leave through the door, my tail wagging even as my heart longed to follow. For the first time since I had been brought to this shelter, I knew this wasn't just another goodbye. It was one of the last goodbyes I'd ever have to say here. Soon I wouldn't be the dog waiting anymore. Soon I would be the dog who finally belonged. The following day passed slower than any I could remember. Every sound from the hallway made me jump, my tail swishing in nervous anticipation. I barely touched my food, my mind fixed only on the thought of those footsteps returning for me. The air in the shelter felt heavy, thick with the weight of waiting, but I refused to let doubt creep in. The man's words from yesterday echoed in my mind like a song I didn't want to end. "Next time, you're coming home." When the afternoon sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the floor, I finally heard them. The child's laugh came first, sweet and bright, cutting through the noise of barking dogs and rattling cages. Then came the man's calm, steady voice, a sound that soothed every part of me that had ever been afraid. My heart leapt, my crooked smile stretching wide as I pressed my face to the bars, my tail slapping the kennel walls. They appeared around the corner, both of them smiling like this was the moment they had been waiting for too. The volunteer unclipped the lock and slipped a leash onto my collar. "Ready, Benny?" the man said, his voice warm and certain. I barked softly, bouncing on my paws, every inch of me shouting yes. We walked out of the shelter together, past the doors I had seen others leave through, past the threshold where my life had been paused for so long. The sun hit my face and I breathed in freedom, 1,000 new smells rushing into my nose, each one more exciting than the last. The man opened the door to a car parked just outside. It smelled like leather, fresh air, and something else I couldn't place, but it felt safe. The child climbed in first, patting the seat beside them, and I scrambled up, curling close to their side. The ride was a blur of colors and movement, the world flashing by outside the window faster than I had ever seen it. My head rested in the child's lap, their small hands stroking my fur. Every now and then, the man glanced back from the driver's seat, his eyes soft, his smile just for me. I didn't know where we were going, but for once it didn't matter. Wherever they were, That was where I belonged. After what felt like forever, we pulled up to a house with a small front yard and a big oak tree swaying in the breeze. The man opened the door and clipped on my leash, letting me step onto the soft grass for the first time in so long. The air smelled alive here, full of flowers, earth, and something sweet drifting from the porch. The child skipped beside me, pointing to the windows, talking about where my bed would go, what toys we'd play with, how I'd get my very own bowl with my name on it. We went inside and everything felt new and warm. The house was quiet but full of life, with sunlight pouring through the windows, walls painted soft colors, and the scent of home all around. My paws clicked on the floor as I explored, my crooked grin growing wider with every step. There was a blanket in the corner already waiting for me, and a basket of toys nearby. The child knelt beside me, hugging my neck and whispering, "This is your home now, Benny." The man crouched down too, resting a hand on my head, his eyes kind and steady. "No more cages," he said, his voice low and full of promise. "You're safe here. You're ours." My heart swelled so big I thought it might burst, and I pressed my face against his chest, feeling his arms wrap around me. That night, I curled up in my new bed, the sounds of my family moving softly around me. The world outside was still and peaceful, the air filled with the smell of dinner and the faint hum of crickets through the open window. For the first time in my life, I closed my eyes and knew that when I opened them again, everything would be just as it was now, warm, safe, and full of love that I had waited for all my life. The morning sun streamed through the curtains, warming my fur as I blinked awake to a brand new world. No metal bars, no echoing barks from rows of cages, no smell of bleach and sadness. Instead, there was the soft rustle of sheets as the child stirred in their bed across the room, the quiet hum of a coffee maker from the kitchen, and the rich scent of bacon sizzling in a pan. My crooked smile stretched wide as I hopped from my new bed and padded toward the hallway, my nails clicking gently on the wood floor. The man greeted me with a smile of his own, kneeling down to scratch behind my ears. "Morning, Benny," he said warmly. My tail wagged so hard it felt like it might fly off. The child ran in moments later, still in their pajamas, hair sticking up in every direction, and threw their arms around me. "You're still here," they giggled, like they were just as surprised as I was that this was real. I licked their cheek and barked softly, my heart overflowing with joy I never thought I'd feel. Breakfast came next, a shiny new bowl filled with food just for me, placed beside the table where my new family sat. The sound of their voices, laughing and talking, was like music, every word a note in the song of belonging. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, but mostly savoring the feeling that this was my spot now, this kitchen, this floor, this family. When I finished, the child slipped me a piece of bacon under the table, giggling when I took it gently from their hand. After breakfast, we ventured outside. The yard stretched wide, full of smells I'd never known. The grass was cool under my paws, the breeze full of stories carried from faraway places. The child ran ahead, calling my name, their laughter echoing as I chased after them. For the first time, the crooked twist of my mouth didn't feel like a mark of something wrong. It felt like it belonged to me, part of who I was. And here, with them, it was something to love. The man set up a small kiddie pool and filled it with water, The sun reflected off the surface, and the child splashed happily, inviting me in. At first, I hesitated, dipping a paw in, feeling the cool water lap at my fur. But their laughter drew me closer, until I jumped in with a happy bark, sending water flying everywhere. The man laughed, snapping pictures, his voice light with joy I could feel even without understanding every word. Later, we went for a walk through the quiet neighborhood. The sidewalks were lined with trees swaying gently in the summer breeze. Other people passed by, some with their own dogs, some waving hello. My tail wagged as new smells and sights surrounded me. Each step another stitch sewing me into the fabric of this life I never imagined I could have. The child held my leash, their small hand firm but kind, as if they already knew they'd never let go. When we returned home, there were toys waiting. A soft, squeaky bone, a rope for tug-of-war, and a tennis ball that bounced in delightful ways across the grass. We played until the sun started to dip, golden light painting everything in warm colors. I collapsed in the shade with the child, their head resting against my side, their voice soft as they told me about all the adventures we would have tomorrow and every day after that. My ears twitched at every word, my heart swelling with a quiet promise of forever. That evening, as dinner cooked and the house filled with comforting smells, the man sat on the couch with me at his feet, rubbing my back in slow, steady circles. The child curled up next to us, yawning softly. The television played in the background, but it was the simple sounds, their laughter, the clinking of plates, the sigh of the wind outside, that made me feel at home. For the first time in my life, I didn't wonder if tomorrow would bring change or loss. Tomorrow would be just like this, full of love, safety, and belonging, and I would be right here where I was meant to be. The next morning began with the soft patter of footsteps coming down the hallway, followed by the faint creak of the bedroom door opening. My eyes fluttered open to see the child standing there, still in their pajamas, hair sticking up in every direction, holding my favorite squeaky bone in their tiny hand. Their smile was sleepy but wide, and the sound of their voice saying my name was the sweetest thing I had ever heard. I jumped off my bed, my paws landing softly on the floor, tail wagging furiously as they ran toward me and wrapped their arms around my neck. There was no fear in their touch, no hesitation, only the warmth of someone who truly wanted me there. We went to the kitchen where the man was already making breakfast. The smell of toast and scrambled eggs filled the air, mingling with the comforting scent of fresh coffee. My food bowl was waiting for me, full and ready, and the sight of it made my heart swell with gratitude. I ate while listening to their voices, the rhythm of their morning chatter making me feel like part of something bigger than myself. Every word, every laugh, every shared glance between them felt like a promise that this was my family now. After breakfast, the child insisted we go outside to play. The yard was still damp from the morning dew, and the cool grass felt wonderful beneath my paws. The child threw the tennis ball over and over, their giggles ringing through the air as I ran after it, each time bringing it back to see their delighted face. The man joined us, kneeling down to scratch my back as I leaned into his hand, loving every second of being wanted. Later, we went for another walk around the neighborhood. This time, the sun was high, and the streets were alive with the sound of distant lawnmowers and chirping birds. The child held my leash proudly, introducing me to everyone we passed. "This is Benny," they told neighbors and strangers alike, their voice filled with pride, as if having me by their side made them the happiest kid in the world. I wagged my tail at every greeting, soaking in every kind word, every friendly smile. I had spent so long being overlooked that this sudden attention felt like a dream I never wanted to wake from. When we came back home, the afternoon was spent under the shade of the big tree in the yard. The child read out loud from a picture book, their words flowing softly as they leaned against me. I lay still, listening to their voice, feeling their small fingers occasionally run through my fur. The man sat nearby, quietly sipping his drink, his eyes filled with a calm contentment that made me feel safe. There was no rush, no fear, only the gentle passing of time spent with the people who had finally chosen me. As evening came, the smell of dinner filled the house again, and we gathered in the living room afterward. The child played with my toys, laughing when I tried to grab the rope from them, pretending to let me win before pulling back with a playful grin. My crooked smile, once something people avoided, made them laugh with joy now, as if it was the most special thing about me. And maybe it was, because it had led me here, to this love I had never known before. Nighttime came with soft music playing from a nearby radio, and the warmth of my new bed waiting for me in the corner of the room. The child knelt beside me, hugging me tight and whispering goodnight, their voice drowsy but full of love. The man patted my head softly before turning out the lights. As I curled up, listening to the quiet sounds of my family settling in for the night, I felt something I had long thought impossible. I belonged here, and each passing day stitched me closer to their hearts, making this home feel more like forever. The sun rose gently over the small town, spilling golden light through the thin curtains of my new home. My ears twitched to the sound of soft footsteps in the hallway, followed by the quiet squeak of the bedroom door. There they were again, the child who had chosen me when no one else would, standing there with sleepy eyes and an eager smile that made my tail thump against the floor before I could even think. They padded over to me, knelt down, and wrapped their little arms around my neck, whispering my name like it was the most important word in the world. It still amazed me every single morning that someone wanted me here. We started the day with breakfast in the kitchen, sunlight streaming through the window and filling the room with warmth. The man hummed softly as he made toast and eggs, the smell of sizzling butter mixing with the faint scent of coffee. My bowl was full again, waiting for me like it always was now, and I ate while the child told stories about the dreams they had last night. Their voice danced through the air, full of wonder, and even though I couldn't understand every word, I understood the happiness in their tone. It made me feel safe in a way I had never known. After breakfast, we went out into the backyard, where the grass was still damp with morning dew. The child laughed as I chased the ball they threw, my paws kicking up little clumps of earth as I ran. They clapped and cheered every time I brought it back, even if it wasn't perfect. To them, I wasn't the dog no one wanted anymore. I was their best friend, and they made sure I knew it every second of the day. The man joined in after a while, kneeling down to scratch behind my ears, his voice soft and full of kindness. Moments like these made me feel like this house had always been mine, even though I had only just found it. Later that morning, we went for a walk through the quiet streets of the neighborhood. The sky was clear and blue, birds sang from the trees, and the breeze carried the faint smell of blooming flowers. The child held my leash with pride, introducing me to everyone we passed. "This is Benny," they said, beaming as if having me beside them was the greatest thing in the world. People smiled and waved, some bending down to say hello. And for the first time, no one looked at my crooked smile like it was something wrong. Instead, they said I was special, that I looked happy, and I was. When we returned home, the afternoon stretched out lazily. We sat beneath the big tree in the yard, the child leaning against me with a picture book in hand, reading aloud in their soft, sing-song voice. I lay perfectly still, listening to every sound, every page turning, every giggle that escaped their lips. The man sat nearby on the porch, occasionally glancing our way with a smile that made my chest feel warm. It was quiet, peaceful, the kind of peace I had never known in the shelter. Here, the hours passed slowly, filled with love instead of waiting. Evening came with the smell of dinner cooking, filling the house with comforting warmth. The child played with me in the living room afterward, tossing my toys across the floor and laughing when I pounced on them. We rolled around together, their laughter echoing against the walls, and every so often they'd stop to hug me tight, as if they wanted to make sure I knew they weren't letting me go. My crooked smile didn't scare them. It made them happy, and that made me feel like the luckiest dog alive. As night fell, we curled up together in my bed, while the man sat in the chair nearby, humming along to the soft music playing on the radio. The child's tiny hand rested on my fur, their breathing growing slower as sleep took over. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of this new life surrounding me. I had once believed no one would ever want me, that my crooked smile meant I would always be alone. But now, every new day promised more love, more laughter, more moments like this. And I drifted off, knowing that tomorrow would be just as full of joy as today. The next morning began with soft rain tapping against the windows, the kind that made the whole house feel wrapped in a quiet blanket. I woke to the sound of the child's giggle, light and musical, followed by their tiny feet padding toward where I lay curled in my bed. Before I could lift my head, their arms wrapped around me, their cheek pressing against my fur as they whispered my name with a tenderness that made my tail wag instantly. I couldn't believe that this was my life now, that someone woke up happy just to see me. Breakfast smelled like pancakes and maple syrup drifting from the kitchen, and as the man flipped them on the stove, the child poured a small bowl of my favorite food, patting my head when I licked their hand in thanks. We ate together, the three of us, and every now and then the child would slip me a tiny piece of pancake, giggling when I caught it mid-air. There was warmth in the room that had nothing to do with the stove, a feeling that filled every corner of my heart and made me forget every lonely day I had ever known. After breakfast, we bundled up in raincoats and boots and stepped out into the misty morning. The neighborhood was quiet, the sound of raindrops mixing with the soft splash of our footsteps on wet pavement. The child held my leash tightly but gently, humming a little tune as we walked. Even in the rain, they wanted to show me everything, every puddle that sparkled like a mirror, every earthworm that wriggled on the sidewalk. They talked to me as if I understood every word, and maybe I did, because their voice filled me with a happiness that no words could ever explain. When we returned home, soaked but laughing, the man brought out big fluffy towels and dried me off, his hands kind and steady. The child insisted on helping, wrapping me in their small arms and declaring that I was the coziest dog in the whole wide world. I leaned into them, feeling the warmth of belonging sink deeper into my bones with every passing moment. The afternoon passed in a blur of play and comfort. We built forts out of blankets in the living room, the child crawling inside and calling me to join. I squeezed in beside them, and we lay there together as they read me another story. This one about a brave little dog who found their forever home. Each word seemed to wrap around me like the soft fabric of the blankets, and I rested my head on the child's lap, listening to the sound of safety, of love that didn't have an end. Later, the rain stopped, leaving the world outside smelling fresh and alive. The man opened the back door, and we all went into the yard, where the grass glistened with water droplets. We played fetch until the sun peeked through the clouds, casting a golden glow over everything. The child laughed so hard their cheeks turned pink, their small hands clapping every time I returned with the ball. To them, I wasn't the dog with a crooked smile. I was their hero, their best friend, and nothing else mattered. Dinner came with more laughter, more stories, more moments where I just sat and watched them, trying to understand how I had gotten so lucky. When the dishes were cleared and the night grew quiet, we curled up together on the couch. The man's voice was soft as he told a story of his own childhood, while the child leaned against me, their eyes growing heavy with sleep. By the time they were carried off to bed, I was already dreaming with my eyes open. I had thought once that no one would ever want me, that my crooked smile made me unworthy of love. But here, in this home filled with warmth and kindness, every day felt like a promise that tomorrow would bring even more joy, even more of this beautiful life I had finally been given. The following day dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the curtains and spilling warmth across the room where I lay curled at the foot of the child's bed. Their small hand rested on my fur even in sleep, like they were afraid I might vanish if they let go. When they stirred awake and saw me there, their smile was the first thing I saw, and it filled me with a happiness so big it made my tail thump against the blankets. The man called us down for breakfast, and as usual, the kitchen was filled with the scent of toast and coffee, a comforting smell that told me I was home. The child poured my food into my bowl and crouched next to me while I ate, talking to me about all the adventures they planned for us that day. Their voice was full of excitement, every word painting pictures of fields to run in, sticks to chase, and secret places only best friends could find together. When we stepped outside, the air was fresh and cool, carrying the songs of birds and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The leash clipped onto my collar, but the child gave me just enough freedom to explore, trusting me to stay close. We wandered down paths lined with wildflowers, the world alive with scents that made my nose twitch and my tail wag endlessly. The child picked dandelions and tucked them behind their ears, laughing when I sniffed curiously at the yellow petals. Later, we came upon a wide meadow where the grass was tall and soft beneath our feet. The man unclipped my leash and let me run, really run, for the first time in what felt like forever. The wind rushed through my fur, the earth solid and strong under my paws, and I barked with pure joy, circling the child who clapped and shouted my name. In that meadow, I wasn't a dog with a crooked smile. I was just a dog, free and loved and full of life. We spent hours there, playing fetch with sticks and rolling in the grass until we were all tired and happy. When it was time to head home, the child held my leash again, their small hand warm and steady. We walked slower this time, the kind of pace that said we were in no rush to leave behind such a perfect morning. Back at the house, the afternoon sun poured through the windows, painting golden stripes on the floor, where I sprawled with the child beside me. They read me another story, their voice soft and sweet, pausing now and then to scratch behind my ears or press a kiss to my head. The man watched us with a quiet smile, as though seeing us together brought him peace too. Evening came, and dinner was filled with chatter about our day, about plans for tomorrow, about all the little dreams the child wanted to share with me. Afterward, we sat on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink as the sun dipped low. The child leaned against me, their small arm wrapped around my neck, whispering that I was their very best friend in the whole world. As the stars began to twinkle above, I realized how much life had changed. The loneliness that once filled my days had been replaced with moments like this, simple and beautiful, with a family that saw me for more than my crooked smile. And as I curled up later that night, the sound of the child's breathing steady and calm beside me, I knew there were more days like this ahead, each one brighter than the last. The day began like every other perfect day had since I came home. The child's arms were already wrapped around me when I opened my eyes, their head resting on my back, breathing soft and even. I didn't move at first. I wanted to stay in that moment forever, wrapped in the warmth of their trust, the silence of early morning, the knowledge that I belonged. We went down to the kitchen where the man was already at the stove, humming a tune under his breath as he flipped something in the pan. The smell of eggs and toast filled the air, and my bowl was waiting as it always was, full and fresh and mine. The child poured water into it carefully before kneeling down beside me while I ate. I finished quickly, then leaned into their lap while they scratched behind my ears and told me about the drawing they wanted to make of us today. After breakfast, the child gathered crayons and paper and sat on the floor near the window, where sunlight made everything golden. I lay nearby, my chin on my paws, watching them draw with furrowed brows and determined hands. They showed me the first drawing after a while. It was me standing tall in the grass, with my crooked smile stretching across my face and the child beside me, hand on my back, both of us surrounded by hearts. I didn't understand the colors, the lines, or the shapes, but I understood the look in their eyes when they held it up for me to see. Later, we walked through the neighborhood as we often did, the leash loose between us, the sidewalk warm under my paws. We stopped to say hello to the neighbor across the street, a woman who always brought biscuits in her apron pocket just for me. The child chatted happily with her while I sat, my tail brushing the ground, waiting patiently for the biscuit and the gentle scratch behind the ears that followed. People smiled at us as we passed, and no one asked questions about the shape of my mouth. They just saw me, a dog who loved and was loved. When we got back, the man was sitting on the porch with 2 glasses of lemonade and a small bowl of water set beside his chair. I drank while they sipped, all of us enjoying the stillness of the afternoon. The child leaned against my side, and I let out a deep sigh, the kind that came from a place of comfort so deep it could never be shaken. The wind stirred the leaves in the yard, carrying with it the scent of fresh grass and sunlight and the safety of a home that would never disappear. That night, after dinner and a game of hide-and-seek in the hallway, the child led me to their room like they always did. I climbed into the bed at the foot of theirs, circling once before settling down. But tonight, they got out of bed and curled up next to me instead, pulling their blanket down and whispering that it was a sleepover night, just for us. Their breath tickled my neck as they spoke about growing up, about dreams of being an artist, about wanting to always live with me, even when they were big. I didn't understand everything, but I felt every word, like a thread weaving itself into my chest. The man came in and found us like that, the child already drifting to sleep against my back. He knelt beside us and ran a hand over my head, his voice quiet as he said goodnight, his eyes lingering just a little longer than usual. There was nothing rushed in the way he moved. Only peace. I closed my eyes again and listened to the sounds of home, the creak of the floor, the hum of the air outside, the slow breath of the child who had once knelt in front of a kennel and chosen me when no one else did. I didn't know how many days I had left, and I didn't need to, because I had lived them all already, everyone I ever needed, in this house with this child, with this man who gave me more love in one morning than I had once known in a year. I had run through fields, rolled in sunlit grass, curled beside a fireplace on cold nights. I had been hugged and kissed and fed and celebrated. I had been wanted. My crooked smile never faded, not even as my eyes began to close for the last time, not even as the child's hand found mine one more time and held it tight in the dark. I had known fear. I had known loneliness. I had known hunger and rejection and waiting. But more than all of that, I had known love. And that made everything worth it.